British Prime Minister Boris Johnson could be out of a job within hours. MPs from the ruling Conservative Party are set to vote on a motion of no confidence following the publication of a report into lockdown parties held in Downing Street and other government offices. Well, Johnson was booed as he arrived for a Thanksgiving service for the Queen on Friday. Well, Dr. Andrew Mycock is a reader in politics and Director of External Engagement at the University of Huddersfield. Thanks ever so much for coming on the programme. First off, what is a vote of no confidence and how's it going to work?
Well, a vote of no confidence is something which is rather unique to the Conservative Party in the fact that they have a committee, the 1922 committee, which is like a sort of trade union for MPs. And if they have a sense in which the Prime Minister is not leading the country in a way in which both the voters and also the party are not happy with, then they have a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister. It's something different to a general election, which empowers the voters to, in some ways, get rid of a Prime Minister. So it's a rather internal affair. And the process is that 15% of the parliamentary party of the Conservative Party, which at the moment is 359 MPs, have to send in letters to the chair of the 1922 committee, Graham Brady, and at which point there is then a vote, and that vote will take place tonight. It's a private ballot. It'll take place between 6 o'clock and 8 p.m. And we'll know the results shortly after 9 o'clock about whether the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has the support of a majority of over 50% of his own MPs.
But at this point, and perhaps regardless of tonight's result, is it a case of if or actually when Boris goes?
Well, it certainly doesn't look good. There's been a lot of questions around Boris Johnson's leadership, not only due to the so-called Partygate revelations, but also his performance with regard to Brexit and also with regard to the way in which the United Kingdom responded to the COVID pandemic. And I think in some ways there are issues around his style of leadership and also his substance. And if you look back at previous Conservative Prime Ministers, when a vote of no confidence is taken, it's usually a sign that the end is nigh. And so I'd say that although it's quite likely that Boris Johnson will gain a majority, he'll probably survive tonight's vote, it certainly has damaged his reputation further. And maybe this is the turning point and over maybe the last period. So we could be seeing really the last few months of a Boris Johnson prime ministership, yes.
You talk about his style over substance. He does have a history, though, of getting himself out of scrapes. Do you think that maybe he's in more danger, though, this time than perhaps he thinks?
I think so. I think Boris Johnson's been known something of a teflon prime minister. He's managed to survive a lot of different challenges. And throughout his political career, he seems to have a remarkable ability to recover from what seems to be situations which are almost fatal to his political future. But this does seem different. I think the problems have been is that it's not just simply that the Conservative Party themselves are increasingly unhappy with the way in which he's leading the country, but it's the electorate. And what we saw over the weekend was, well, a real sign of concern when the Prime Minister attended a service for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee at St Paul's Cathedral. There was a sizable number of people in the crowd who booed him, and that's very irregular. We don't usually see these kind of public signs of political unrest when it is an issue around the monarchy. And I think that for a number of MPs, they'll be looking on at the television and thinking, well, this really doesn't look good. The Prime Minister has also recently lost a number of by-elections, and there are 2 by-elections next week in which the polling also looked particularly poor for the government. So I think there has been a sense in which this has been pressure which has been building. And maybe although tonight will not be the denouement, the end of his prime ministership, it certainly is not looking good for his long-term prospects.
If we look at his predecessor, if we look at Theresa May, she won the vote of no confidence and then, of course, subsequently got booted out of her position and was replaced. If Boris goes, though, it's not immediately obvious, as it was when she left. It's not immediately obvious who would replace him, is it?
I think it's interesting that the party was divided differently during the prime ministership of Theresa May, and particularly Brexit was the key division within the party. It's less clear now. We're seeing both Remainers and Leavers coming together and in some ways expressing a dissatisfaction with Boris Johnson's leadership. And at the same time, there doesn't seem to be a clear candidate to replace him. Many of those candidates that seem to be lead, are members of his cabinet, and thus far they've been expressing loyalty to their leader. It will be interesting the extent to which tonight's result damages Boris Johnson's prime ministership, and particularly his reputation within the party. It might just then encourage one or two of those candidates, Liz Truss possibly, Michael Gove, or even Rishi Sunak, to maybe consider popping their head above the parapet. One thing is true is that there are one or two Conservative Party members that are very unhappy with Boris Johnson's leadership, particularly Jeremy Hunt, who are very prepared to suggest that they would actively seek to replace him. But I think until we find the result of tonight's vote of no confidence, we're not really going to see whether we've got any runners and riders to replace him.
It's not necessarily the numbers, though, it's the politics. Dr. Andrew Mycock, thank you very much.
Thank you.